Classified the FBI and Justice Department surveillance records from the 2016 campaign and then backed off. Over the weekend on Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo, Congressman John Ratcliffe said the records contain exculpatory evidence that undercuts the pretext for opening the 2016 FBI Russia case.
I have seen them, and I can tell you as a former federal prosecutor, my opinion is that declassifying them would not expose any national security information, would not expose any sources and methods. It would expose certain folks at the Obama Justice Department and FBI and their actions taken to conceal material facts from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
So you mentioned at the top, Harris, the committee and Justice Department failed to agree on terms for the Deputy Attorney General's Capitol Hill appearance last week, with some House Republicans insisting on a transcribed interview under oath as opposed to a more informal briefing with no paper trail. If the committee takes that unusual step of compelling the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General, you should look for a subpoena sometime on Wednesday, Harris.
I'm wondering why it has to be this hard, when reportedly a high-level member of the DOJ may have said that he would work with the FBI to kick the president out of office. Should be fairly easy to get anybody to talk. But anyway, we move on.
I would really draw your attention to the president's phone interview on Fox and Friends on, I think it's Tuesday last week. It's the day after they traveled on Air Force One. And he said he was surprised by his Deputy Attorney General's decision not to appear on the Hill, given what he had told the president about that conversation.
On the plane,
this does suggest there may be a conflict between the two.
All right. Good nugget. Thank you, Catherine.
You bet.
Let's move on. California Congressman Darrell Issa, member of the House Judiciary Committee and House Oversight Committee. So hopefully you just heard what Catherine and I were talking about, because I think it's a fair question. I mean, really, this is so high level, you would think that people would sit down. And if there is a conflict between what was said on Air Force One to the president and now what might be said behind closed doors, where does that take us?
Well, Harris, one of the things that the public should understand from my years of investigating is when you get down to, let's say, a line attorney working somewhere at Department of Justice, these are people who work for the executive branch. They're accountable to Senate-confirmed individuals such as Rosenstein and, for that matter, Jeff Sessions. But when you think about how John Kelly got the title Chief of Staff, Rod Rosenstein is a staff employee of the president. He works specifically for the president, as does the Attorney General. These individuals, as staff of the president, have to be accountable for what they do on behalf of the president and certainly what they do on behalf of the American people. So when Rod Rosenstein doesn't come voluntarily in the ordinary course of an inquiry where we have conflicting statements, he flies in the face of two things: his obligation he made when he was confirmed by the Senate, and in fact his obligation to be forthcoming with the president. One of the things that you've been seeing repeatedly is if it hurts the president, somehow the staff of the president seem to be, oh yeah, of course they'll talk. And if it hurts the previous president or helps this president, somehow they can't make themselves available to say things under penalty of perjury.
Wow, that is plain speaking. Congressman Issa, you said that Rosenstein works for the president as staff, but there was this kind of conflicting political view that if the president fires Rosenstein, it sends a tumble, if you will, politically for those around him and just ahead of the midterm elections. What do you make of that?
Look, we don't want the president to fire any of his staff for doing their job, to be forthcoming, honest, and live up to their constitutional obligations and their statutory obligations. But if they fail to do it, including answering legitimate questions of Congress, the House or the Senate, then in fact, by definition, that disservice makes them ineligible to serve in an administration. Again, Rod Rosenstein is no longer a line attorney. He is in fact a staff member of the president. And just like Jeff Sessions or Wilbur Ross or anyone else, there's an expectation that on behalf of the president they'll be accountable, and that's what we're not getting. And this delaying tactic, this run out the clock, is exactly what we saw under the Obama administration, and it's simply Rod Rosenstein continuing it as though he's not working for a different president, a president who said, right or wrong, I want everyone to be forthcoming. A president who, in fact, has given a lot of information directly in the Mueller investigation, and yet somehow the person who oversees that investigation, Rod Rosenstein, doesn't want to have conversations that might lead to his recusal. It might lead to Congress understanding what happened before the election that actually did give Hillary Clinton in many cases advantages, including not indicting her.
Yeah, wow. A second recusal. You mentioned your investigative past. In all of this, what do you make of what Catherine Herridge was reporting, that there could be some inconsistency or surprise? She said the president was surprised that Rod Rosenstein wouldn't sit down with House lawmakers, given their conversation on the plane, Air Force One last week.
Well, you know what, there's an interesting fact, which is lying to Rod Rosenstein is in fact a crime. You lie to DOJ and it's a crime. Apparently lying to the president isn't. And there's never a more important time to find out whether one person saying something on behalf of the administration or to the president and another person saying something else isn't true. The president has to work with people that tell him the truth. And if he hasn't told the truth, it is absolutely essential that that be known. If he has told the truth, he just has to come and say it.
Wow. Yes or no? Subpoena Rod Rosenstein.
If he doesn't show up, subpoena him. If he doesn't show up, hold him in contempt. If he doesn't show up, demand that the president, by definition, make him ineligible to serve.
Congressman Issa from the great state of California, thank you.
Thanks, Harris.
Good to see you. With the midterm elections fast approaching, both political parties are rolling out their closing arguments, what they are saying, amid whether it will resonate with voters. Just for power, while former Vice President Joe Biden just a day earlier in Kentucky went after the president. Back and forth, watch it.
On this election day, November 6th, every American faces a simple choice. You can either vote for Democrat mob rule, or you can vote for a Republican Party that stands proudly for law and order, fairness, freedom, and justice.
Our values are being shredded. Our democracy is under assault. A president has put his own interests before those of our ideals. Amassing power, abusing power.
Kevin Corke is live at the White House. Kevin?
Good afternoon, Harris. You're right. 3 weeks, 22 days to be very specific until the midterm elections in November. And that means for this White House taking the message on the road to the voters directly over the next few weeks. In fact, we're going to expect the president to make a nice western swing to my favorite part of the country. You know, I'm from Colorado, so he gets a chance to go out west to Montana, then to Arizona, and over to Nevada. And certainly there'll be more where that came from in terms of more rallies down the road. Now, over the weekend, as you pointed out, in Kentucky, the president used his latest Make America Great rally to remind voters that, yes, he's kept a great many of his promises, and he needs their support to keep it going past the midterms. And that, of course, means voting in November. Let me take you to Twitter for just a moment, Harris. I think you'll find this interesting. The president said this about energy. He's talking about building momentum, the so-called red wave. He tweeted, "The crowds at my rallies are far bigger than they have ever been before, including the 2016 election. Never an empty seat in these large venues. Many thousands of people watching screens outside. Enthusiasm and spirit is through the roof. Something big is happening. Watch." Now, there had been plenty of concern following that fiercely debated Kavanaugh confirmation that maybe Democrats would be more enthusiastic about the midterms. But while the GOP is trending certainly in the right direction, virtually closing that gap, well, the Democrats' enthusiasm level is apparent as well. Let me tell you about a number that I think people will find surprising. Democrats raking in some cash for the fight coming up. The Democratic Governors Association says they raised more than $100 million for the 2018 midterm cycle, including $22.2 million of that coming in September. Governor Jay Inslee of Washington said it's a reflection of what I call the great awakening of the Democratic family, adding that as far as the states are concerned, Trump can't stop us. Again, we'll be watching all those rallies as they continue to unfold. In fact, I suspect I'll be making my way out west and other parts of the country to listen to what the president has to say. Again, 22 days, Harris, It'll be here before you know it. Back to you.
All right, Kevin Corke, thank you very much. Let's bring in Ronna McDaniel, Republican National Committee Chairwoman. Great to see you always. You know, the last time we talked, we were speaking about the numbers, the record fundraising that the RNC has done. And since then, there has been even more movement as you move up to the midterm elections.
Yeah, we've raised over $252 million. And what that translates to is boots on the ground. We've trained our 25,000 field organizers. That's 5 times more than we had going into 2016. We have 540 staff on the ground. We're in 28 states. We're all energized to turn out our vote, but we've built the infrastructure to make those last-minute door knocks, to talk to voters, to make the case of results versus resistance, and share with voters what Republicans have done to make their lives better.
There is typically a headwind. You and I have spoken, sometimes upwards of 30 seats. I think Barack Obama in his first midterm election lost north of 60. What has made the difference, though, to turn that headwind a little bit more wind at your back right now?
Well, I think the choice is very clear. As Democrats have obstructed this president every step of the way, and the culmination of the Kavanaugh hearing, seeing the interruptions, seeing the paid protesters, seeing that they would do anything they could to stop Brett Kavanaugh from serving on the bench. And then you contrast that with the results of what Republicans have put forward for the American people: higher wages, 4 million new jobs, high GDP, taking on the opioid crisis, taking care of our military. It is a really clear contrast. And if voters want to reject, or the only way the voters are going to get this democracy working again is to reject the resist, obstruct playbook that Democrats have counted on for the past 2 years.
I want to skip to the next topic. It all kind of ties in. There are a number of candidates who say that they would like the president to show up on the campaign trail and give an endorsement. You actually have been given a presidential level endorsement, a second term as chairwoman of the RNC. I know that there is a vote that they will take, but when the president endorses you and you've got those fundraising numbers, I'd like to see how many hands will go against that. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm so honored that the president chose me to be only the second woman to run the Republican National Committee. It shows how much he values women. He has been a partner with us with our record fundraising, and I was elected unanimously, and I'm honored to have his support, and I'm looking forward to supporting him in the re-elect.
Have you and the president had an occasion to talk message and what is a winning message, what's working right now and what will work for 22 days?
Well, the message has to be the contrast, and the president and I have talked about that. You have to put forward to voters what's happening, the comeback, what we can achieve as a country, and then what we'll lose if we turn back the clock to the Pelosi, Schumer dark ages, because there is a lot at stake. We are a country on the rise. Our economy's booming. We have restored our country as a global leader, and there's so many good things happening for the American people. Lowest unemployment in history for the African American and Hispanic communities. There is a lot at stake in this election, and Democrats are offering nothing. They've done nothing except sit on their hands for 2 years and resist and obstruct. So we have to make the case to the voters at what's at stake to lose and what happens if the Democrats take the majority.
But that's so interesting, the comeback contract. I took a note of that. I know the president's getting ready to go to some places where you might not have thought there'd be contention, like Arizona, but you're seeing a change. You're seeing that. And I wrote it down again, the comeback contract kind of in play. We'll check back in with you. Ronna McDaniel, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Hillary Clinton raising a lot of eyebrows today with her remarks about her husband's affair with a White House intern. By the way, we should call this the Bill Clinton scandal, right? Not the Monica Lewinsky scandal. I don't know why we call it that. The potential fallout for someone who sees herself as a champion of women in the Me Too era.
In retrospect, do you think Bill should have resigned in the wake of the Monica Lewinsky scandal?
Absolutely not.
In retrospect, do you think Bill should have resigned in the wake of the Monica Lewinsky scandal?
Absolutely not.
It wasn't an abuse of power?
No.
There are people who look at the incidents of the 90s and they say a president of the United States cannot have a consensual relationship with an intern. The power imbalance is too great.
Who was an adult.
That's Hillary Clinton denying that her husband's affair with then White House intern Monica Lewinsky was an abuse of power, and that the former president was right not to resign. In that interview with CBS, Hillary Clinton said Lewinsky was an adult. You heard her say it. And at the time of the affair, she was 22 years old. Clinton's remarks are raising a lot of eyebrows today, given the current Me Too movement she has championed, she says. Time now for the Power Panel. Adele Malpass, political reporter for Real Clear Politics and the former chairwoman of the Manhattan Republican Party. Tiffany Cross, co-founder and managing editor of the Beat DC and co-host of the Beat DC podcast, which I've had an occasion to listen to. Great to see you both. Let's talk about Hillary Clinton's words in this era. What do you think?
Well, I think her comments were a little tone deaf, to be quite honest. I think it must be really challenging for her to always have to answer for her husband's indiscretions. I don't know if that's a fair position for her to be put in. And I think, I wasn't very far. Monica Lewinsky and I are close in age. I remember being in college watching this whole incident play out. And so I do think the power dynamics are off when you're a young 22-year-old intern at the White House and this older man who happens to be president of the United States is showing you some attention. Sure. But I do want to say, I think there is the difference is that's not necessarily a legal matter. And remember, Bill Clinton wasn't impeached because he had an affair. He was impeached because he lied about the affair. And I think the politics surrounding the investigation is where you get into some murky waters.
And you might go deep on that and just say if there hadn't been the affair with the intern. And many of us with preteens and teenagers know 22 is still very young. Your thought?
It was complete abuse of power. She is beyond tone deaf. It was public shaming at the time. She was 22 and he was 49 and the president of the United States, and they were in the Oval Office. And for her to defend that in the age of #MeToo is kind of reprehensible, particularly in context of there were so many. There was Paula Jones. Each one who came out against President Clinton at the time, there was kind of a public shaming of them. But regardless of that, in many ways, this has always been their inconsistency.
Yeah.
This is why the left has had a little trouble being the voice of #MeToo, because they defended Bill Clinton.
Maybe, but do you feel that way about Melania Trump? Because she's come out really hard and said that, well, you have to have evidence, as if a woman's word isn't evidence enough. And, when she's, and the rare occasion that she's made to defend her husband is, do you still feel like it's an outrage in this Me Too movement that she has not been a vocal supporter of the Me Too movement?
She hasn't come out with, yesterday she had an interview over the weekend and was, also defended her husband. And I think there's more inconsistencies as well. Keith Ellison is running for state attorney general in Minnesota, and there's been a woman who's come out against abuse claims, physical and sexual abuse claims against him. And again,
no, not sexual. I just want to be clear, not sexual abuse.
It's physical.
Right.
And
she said she had a video and never produced the video. Her son claimed there was a video. There's never been produced a video. There was an investigation into it. They cleared him. They said there's not enough investigation or evidence.
So wait a minute. Can I just step in for a second? Because I respect the question that you asked first about what Melania Trump had said about evidence. So now I want to toss it back to you because you're bringing up lack of evidence. I mean, is that only a convenience factor? And when you agree with a woman and so that's
no,
okay?
I disagree.
But when you disagree with the first lady, then evidence doesn't count?
No, I don't think I have an inconsistency here. I think evidence absolutely matters. I think there was evidence in the Monica Lewinsky case. I think there's been evidence in other cases. I'm not sure if you're...
But you're defending the Keith Ellison case. I don't think that case has been fully investigated, or has it?
It has been. That's my point. It has been investigated. The investigators in Minnesota said there's not enough here to pursue any charges against Keith Ellison. They said that there was this video of him
isn't that akin to what the First Lady is saying?
No, not at all.
Go ahead.
I will also say that Stormy Daniels has not had evidence. I mean, Monica Lewinsky, I hate to get into this, was the blue Gap dress with
I think we all remember.
With presidential bodily fluid. I mean, it was kind of it was conclusive, and but it really does, I think, get back to the political issue of the inconsistency, particularly with Keith Ellison, whereas they don't have there isn't evidence there, but there wasn't evidence really with Dr. Ford, and that doesn't which are you? Do you want evidence or do you not want evidence?
Word is evidence enough. Did you not think her testimony was evidence?
You don't think it is in the Keith Ellison
legally
case?
It is. So I think if she just said that this happened and that's it, I think that could count as evidence. But what she said, Harris, was that she has video of it, and so when investigators went into it, she said, "Oh, well, I don't know where the video went." I think that's very different, and we have to be really careful in making these false equivalencies between these cases in this
But isn't her word enough? Why do you need the video?
Because she introduced the video. Had she said there was no video and just said this happened, I think that warrants an investigation.
I would say that the bigger arching issue here is Hillary Clinton, if you're a woman on the campaign trail, somebody that you want with you right now, given these statements and given this what you call tone deaf and what you called even further, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is this where we are right now, that you would want her, she your only option?
I would love to see Hillary Clinton out every single
I'm
day.
sure you would.
She is the best messenger for the Republicans. Last week she kind of stuck her foot in her mouth on a different topic where she talked about civility, and it was anything but.
Oh, I hope we can talk about that after.
I'm going to keep the panel. Don't go anywhere. President Trump's re-election campaign.
But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie. Not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
He turned his back on questions as the First Lady followed, applauding. The woman who could bring down the president appeared for the first time today, leaving her apartment with her lawyer. Lewinsky has indicated she will accuse Mr. Clinton of a sexual relationship, but only with a guarantee from prosecutors.
He knows that I want essentially full immunity. He knows that I want and would accept nothing less than a promise not to prosecute. So how close we are is really in his hands, not mine.
Tonight, independent counsel Kenneth Starr is considering whether to accept Lewinsky's oral statement. He had been insisting on a written version. CBS News has learned the independent counsel is investigating reports that people working in the White House spotted Mr. Clinton and Lewinsky alone in the mansion at various times. Secret Service records have been subpoenaed. The agents expect to be next. The White House strongly denies the reports.
The president's denial is quite clear that there couldn't have been that type of encounter. We've checked even with people who would have presumably been brought a report of any incident of that nature, and they categorically deny there was such an incident.
Sources tell CBS News Lewinsky was a frequent visitor to the White House long after she left the staff. Last month, she was cleared in at least 4 times, including weekends and evenings. But her welcome seems to have ended 3 weeks ago. On January 3rd, she was denied entry at the gate. And sources tell CBS News she threw a fit, screaming, "Don't you know who I am?" The president was traveling the day Lewinsky was turned away. 4 days later, she signed her sworn affidavit that she never had sex with Mr. Clinton.
A grand jury is due to convene tomorrow, Wednesday, and 7 more months for the other shoe to drop. And the Daily News ran the story with the caption, "Liar, liar." After President Clinton admitted to having an inappropriate relationship with Monica Lewinsky, the president was impeached by the House, but then acquitted by the United States Senate.
This afternoon in this room, from this chair, I testified before the Office of Independent Counsel and the grand jury. I answered their questions truthfully, including questions about my private life, questions no American citizen would ever want to answer. Still, I must take complete responsibility for all my actions, both public and private. And that is why I am speaking to you tonight. As you know, in a deposition in January, I was asked questions about my relationship with Monica Lewinsky. While my answers were legally accurate, I did not volunteer information. Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part for which I am solely and completely responsible. But I told the grand jury today, and I say to you now, that at no time did I ask anyone to lie, to hide or destroy evidence, or to take any other unlawful action. I know that my public comments and my silence about this matter gave a false impression. I misled people, including even my wife. I deeply regret that. I can only tell you I was motivated by many factors. First, by a desire to protect myself from the embarrassment of my own conduct. I was also very concerned about protecting my family. The fact that these questions were being asked in a politically inspired lawsuit, which has since been dismissed, was a consideration too. In addition, I had real and serious concerns about an independent counsel investigation that began with private business dealings 20 years ago. Dealings, I might add, about which an independent federal agency found no evidence of any wrongdoing by me or my wife over 2 years ago. The independent counsel investigation moved on to my staff and friends, then into my private life, and now the investigation itself is under investigation. This has gone on too long, cost too much, and hurt too many innocent people. Now this matter is between me, the two people I love most, my wife and our daughter, and our God. I must put it right, and I am prepared to do whatever it takes to do so. Nothing is more important to me personally, but it is private, and I intend to reclaim my family life for my family. It's nobody's business but ours. Even presidents have private lives. It is time to stop the pursuit of personal destruction and the prying into private lives and get on with our national life. Our country has been distracted by this matter for too long, and I take my responsibility for my part in all of this. That is all I can do. Now it is time, in fact, it is past time to move on. We have important work to do, real opportunities to seize, real problems to solve, real security matters to face. And so tonight, I ask you to turn away from the spectacle of the past 7 months, to repair the fabric of our national discourse, and to return our attention to all the challenges and all the promise of the next American century. Thank you for watching, and good night.
Do you have a moment?
The president is outraged.
Is it true you advised Monica Lewinsky?
Only months before that eventful morning in January, Paul Begala had returned from exile to an office of his own in the West Wing.
I mean, I felt like I was hit with a 2x4 in the solar plexus. I mean, my stomach was in knots. I was sick to my stomach. Well, I don't think I want to describe what my gut was telling me to do at that point, because it had more to do with vomiting than anything else. But it was, you read this and you said, this is incredible. I mean, and it was hard to believe.
The news of this day is that Kenneth Starr, the independent counsel, is investigating allegations that you suborned perjury by encouraging a 24-year-old woman, former White House intern, to lie under oath in a civil deposition about her having had an affair with you. Mr. President, is that true?
That is not true. That is not true.
The author of the Clinton Crisis Playbook returned instinctively to its fundamental strategies. First, parse the answer.
You had no sexual relationship with this young woman.
There is not a sexual relationship. That is accurate.
By now, after listening carefully to Clinton for 6 years, those of us in the press knew the playbook as well as the West Wing team. We too parsed the words and pushed his press secretary.
Would the president be matter of fact about anything he's doing today when this is blowing up around him?
We'd like to have his answers.
The president's always told everyone to tell the truth.
Is your interpretation of that statement that he meant to categorically deny that he had?
I'm not going to parse the statement. You've got the statement.
But even Mike McCurry was worried about Bill Clinton's answers.
And we kept asking lawyers and others, well, where is the strong denial? We need to have a very strong denial. And of course, the president, as he struggled with the story the day that it broke, went through a lot of contorted answers in 3 interviews that he gave that day, in which there were questions about which verb tense he had used, because he had said that there is no relationship, and we were all looking at each other saying, he didn't deny it strongly enough.
That same day, on a subway in New York City, the beeper of a veteran political operative began to vibrate.
It was the old phone number, the president's personal line,
And, that hadn't gone off for a while, and I sort of thought maybe there was a mistake.
No mistake. Bill Clinton, in trouble again, was reaching out secretly to Morris and his polls.
And he said, yeah, this is horrible. This is just terrible. Ever since I was elected president, ever since '92, I've sort of shut myself down, shut my body down, sexually, I mean. But I just screwed up with this girl. I didn't do what they said I did, but I did do something. And I think I may have done so much that I can't prove my innocence.
And Morris, who now had personal experience with public disgrace, offered to help his old client.
I said Nixon was impeached because he just never told the public the truth about Watergate. And he said, you really think that I could do this? And I said, look, I don't know. Let's poll it. Let's find out. And I did a poll that night, and I called him back late that night. And I said, well, they'll forgive the adultery, but they won't forgive the lying. So I was hoping that he would sort of let the public down gently. He interpreted the poll numbers as being that he had to stonewall. And he said, well, we just have to win, don't we?
The stonewalling included members of his own cabinet, which met 2 days after the Lewinsky story broke. Unwittingly, they did Bill Clinton's bidding.
I believe that the allegations are completely untrue.
I'll second that. Definitely. But surely all of you understand.
Wait, there's two more people left.
I'll second that too.
Third it.
I did believe the president when he spoke to us January 23rd.
When you went out and affirmed that, did you believe him?
Yes. Absolutely, or I wouldn't have gone out and affirmed it.
After consulting with a trusted Hollywood producer who also believed the president, Clinton would give a far more dramatic denial.
But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
Back to work. A classic line from the Clinton playbook. Indeed, the president and his staff would stick this scandal out by focusing relentlessly on the picture of Bill Clinton hard at work.
Our goal was to have the president portrayed doing the job he should be doing as president. I think the fact that we did that and that the trains continued to run on time, basically, is probably what helped rescue Bill Clinton from this political scandal.
This gets back to the fundamental lesson of political survival that Bill Clinton taught me, which is if you make it about the American people's lives instead of your life, you're going to be okay.
And of course, the playbook called for Hillary to perform her role.
The great story here, for anybody willing to find it and write about it and explain it, is this vast right-wing conspiracy that has been conspiring against my husband.
The vast right-wing conspiracy. As they had done so often before, the Clintons were demonizing the adversary. One of the original hired guns was called back to the fold.
This started out as a $40,000 land deal that lost money, and about $50 million, and 5 years later, after nobody could find anything, we wiring up people in hotels and feeding them whiskey, trying to get them to talk and everything else. I wasn't very subtle about it.
But you had their encouragement.
No, I didn't. I didn't ask them.
And they didn't stop you.
No. But they weren't going to. They stopped me.
An implicit encouragement.
I wasn't going to be stopped. No, oh, no, sir. Don't ever think that this was anything close to applaud. I did it. I'm glad I did it. And I pointed out things to people that needed to be pointed out.
That spring and summer passed as one West Wing insider after another was paraded before the grand jury.
Monica! Did you have sexual relations with the president?
Monica! And the young woman at the heart of the scandal became an infamous overnight celebrity. Then, just before Bill Clinton himself would face the grand jury, word from someone close to the president that he would change his story. For those of us who followed him, this was a high-level, calculated leak to prepare the public and even his family for the messy details to come. For many in the senior staff and cabinet, it was clear confirmation that Bill Clinton had been lying to them and using them all along.
I was very disappointed. I was very angry. It was, you know, about as you can imagine. I mean, put yourself in that position as someone you trusted, who you believed in, who misled you, and then I, in turn, unwittingly misled the country. I took that very, very seriously.
Once you found out that the president had not told the truth, did you feel that he had used you for...
Of course. I mean, what's surprising about that? The president felt like he had used us.
There was along with disappointment, some anger. The thing that was the overwhelming sense that you blew this great opportunity to really do some extraordinary things for the country because of this. That's what is the overriding emotion I think most of us felt as we went into that period.
After Kenneth Starr and his deputies completed their grand jury interrogation of Bill Clinton, the only president ever to face such a criminal inquiry, he retreated to the solarium in the private residence of the White House. A few of the original loyalists who'd spent that awkward evening at the Ritz-Carlton in Boston during Jennifer Flowers were this time witnessing the Clintons at the very bottom.
It was a pretty tough day. It's a pretty tough day.
Was he mad?
No. Didn't just seem tired. Didn't know.
What about Mrs. Clinton? Was she
upset? Yeah. Yeah, she was upset. So you could tell that she'd been crying. Yeah, she was not, it's not too good a mood.
Once again, in the midst of a personal crisis, Bill Clinton went on national television. To the chagrin of his own staff, he seemed less contrite than sorry for himself. And once again, as he had tried to make it clear, he was paying a personal price for his indiscretion. These pictures of the Clintons leaving for a vacation on Martha's Vineyard spoke volumes.
Bill Clinton holding on to Buddy for dear life is the way I remember the picture.
You're on the helicopter.
Yeah, I was there waiting to fly off on this happy family vacation. I pretty firmly believe that there had not been many conversations between the Clintons as a couple on this until they were able to get away and be by themselves.
The old Harry Truman line that Bill Clinton had quoted about friends and dogs took on a certain sad truth during that Martha's Vineyard vacation, but there was little time for healing.
Today, I ordered our armed forces to strike at terrorist-related facilities in Afghanistan and Sudan.
American missiles had leveled targets supposedly tied to Osama bin Laden in retaliation for the bombing of American embassies in Africa. Clinton had rushed back to Washington to manage the crisis, but his national security advisor knew it would be a tough sell to those of us in the press corps who might view it cynically as an attempt to change the subject.
I remember the president saying, let's just do what we think is the right thing to do. We'll probably get it either way. And I think the right thing to do was to respond, and we did.
But I believe
the subject wouldn't stay changed for long. Knowing that Kenneth Starr was about to release his potentially devastating report, Bill Clinton would launch a campaign of contrition.
I agree with those who have said that in my first statement after I testified, I was not contrite enough. I don't think there is a fancy way to say that I have sinned.
Later that day, those sins, cataloged in excruciatingly graphic detail, were made public in the explosively hyped Starr report. Bill Clinton met privately with an old friend who would soon join his legal team.
He was a man in deep trouble, personally, emotionally, and you could tell it. He knew he was in trouble personally. He was in trouble not only with his family, which was, I think, first and foremost his concern. He had trouble with his cabinet. He was in trouble with his staff.
Are you considering resignation, Mr. President?
Even the true believers in the West Wing feared he might be finished.
I was very afraid that the whole thing could be over. That there'd be a sort of delegation of congressional Democrats, and you know what I mean? Mark Republicans go down to the White House.
come to the White House
yeah,
and tell
say,
the president
yeah, just,
it's over.
Right. And quite candidly, I was not alone in that fear.
I was talking to a close friend in the Senate, Kent Conrad, who I've known for 25 years, and I said, how are we doing up there? And he was saying that we're about 2 or 3 days away from a delegation of senior senators from the Democratic Party coming down and talking to the president about resigning.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
They figured the final blow might be the public release of the president's videotaped grand jury testimony. But ironically, the sight of the President of the United States being asked such humiliating questions was just the break he needed.
If you touched another person on the breast, touched the genitalia, if Monica Lewinsky says that you used a cigar as a sexual aid with her in the Oval Office area, would she be lying?
To Democrats in Congress and to much of the public, Starr and his deputies seemed harsh and partisan. The president's anger seemed justified. His approval ratings actually moved up. And to the surprise of official Washington, in the midterm elections that fall, Democrats picked up seats in Congress. Bill Clinton's old arch-rival, sensing a revolt in his own party, suddenly resigned.
The American people sent us a message that would break the eardrums of anyone who was listening.
At the beginning of this term, Bill Clinton had tried to assume the mantle of healer. Now he hoped moderate Republicans might hear a healing message in the election results.
The House will be in order. Gentleman from Illinois.
But the hardliners still controlled Congress.
From Georgia, Mr. Barr.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
And they were listening to the constituents who hated Bill Clinton.
Mr. Speaker and colleagues, today our votes and our consciences must be based on the rule of law.
And sure enough, on a winter Saturday, 6 weeks later, the United States House of Representatives ensured Bill Clinton's presidency would be won for the record books.
The yeas are 228, the nays are 206. Article 1 is adopted.
As he and his team quietly watched the proceedings, William Jefferson Clinton became only the second president ever impeached.
He was just subdued, I would say. Didn't say very much. Watched it. We just kind of watched it and didn't. I think none of us said very much. We just watched the vote take place.
I think his view was that they can do whatever they want. They can impeach me. They can vote in the Senate and remove me. But they're going to have to do that to get me to leave.
The Senate will convene as a court of impeachment.
Removal from office was never in doubt. The Republicans did not have the 2/3 majority in the Senate they needed.
Mr. Conrad. Mr. Conrad, not guilty. Mr. Coverdale. Mr. Coverdale, guilty.
Bill Clinton, of course, would win the most important vote of his life.
Mr. Domenici.
The old playbook had worked again. Throughout the scandal, Americans had seen him doing his job. Besides, the economy was good, and by now, the thoroughbreds' flaws were well known. But there was no glory to be had in this victory. No, this time, the comeback kid had simply survived. Things slowed him down. He and his shadow, Dick Morris,